Happy to be here. Happy to be at another Casual Connect. Really think this is a perfect topic for this conference because we're talking about a sector now that is worth well over $3 billion. The secret is out. A couple of years ago, there were still a lot of question marks about the validity of this industry. Could it last? Was it real? Were people utterly crazy to spend real money for virtual currency playing these social slot games? A lot of those questions have been answered. You're seeing significant investments into this space. There's been a number of M&A deals, and there'll probably be a very, very large one announced here in the coming weeks. And so it's certainly a very visible sector now. There's a whole track here dedicated to the casino genre at Casual Connect, and the market's become very competitive. There's a lot of big players, a lot of very well funded, very well capitalized companies, and in order to be successful these days, you really have to execute on all facets: content, live game operations, analytics, user acquisition. So to kind of break into the top 15, as all these three companies have, is really quite spectacular in a time where you're going up against the Playtikas of the world, IGTs, Aristocrats. It's very challenging. So these guys have done a great job, and really happy that they've agreed to do this panel to provide some insight as to what are some of the things that have worked for them, best practices, lessons learned. They're not going to give away their entire trade secrets, but certainly can hopefully shed some insight as to how to make it in a very crowded and very competitive market. So with that being said, just want to introduce everyone here. We've got Anton Krasnyy, CEO of Murka, Niko, COO of Rocket Games, and Nick Talarico, CEO of Super Lucky. I'll let these guys all say a kind of quick word about themselves here. But also, why don't you guys each kind of start out with, one or two things that kind of clicked for you over the past 12 months where, it really kind of, you started to enjoy some success, started to really generate some meaningful revenues, and what you kind of equate that to. Why don't we start with you, Anton?
All right. So we are offering different experience on market. So we at some point we decided to stop copying and cloning the top games on market and to invent something new. That's what differs us. Also, I think we're good at marketing and at data analysis. So yeah, it differs us from many others. But anyway, yeah, that's it.
Hi, I'm Niko, CEO of Rocket Games, as Adam said. We've been around for about 3 years. Rocket Games were mostly ex-Zynga crew, so very data-driven, analytical DNA. And we've been making slots games for 3 years. We started out in video slots back in 2013. And what it really clicked for us, so we built a solid business off the back of video slots. Solid in the sense that it was a real business, generating cash flows and profitable, and building a real team. But what really clicked for us was last summer, when we started to develop a deeper understanding of what we thought the market was doing, and understanding the slots player more, understanding them as a customer. And we came to the realization that these are the same players who play in land-based casinos. And at that time, there was very little, about 30% of the land-based casino floor in the US, and North America in general, is dedicated to classic-style mechanical three-reel stepper slot machines, and that was highly underrepresented on mobile at the time in particular. And so we were one of the first movers into the classic-style three-reel mechanical slot gameplay, and that is really what we attribute our growth over the last 12 months certainly to. So we'll talk more about that, I'm sure, later on, but that's kind of high level where we came from.
My name's Nick from Super Lucky. So we've been around about 5 years, and we started actually with bingo and then moved into slots, video poker, blackjack, and solitaire. I think that we decided to focus on on slots, excuse me, because the consumer sinks currency a lot faster. We're more experimental. I think it's pretty well tied to data analysis, but we run tons of live experiments. We're fortunate enough to have a lot of SKUs with a fair amount of volume. So we run a lot of experiments, and that's really where we've gained our learnings. In terms of what clicks, people ask that all the time. They'll just be like, oh, it's the math, right? Or it's IP, right? And it's never one thing. And both Anton and Niko alluded to that. It's never one thing. There's so many different things that go into building a successful social casino title that I think it is important to be very data-driven and really experimental with your products.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting. All three of these guys, while they're certainly enjoying some success now and being featured, they've actually started a number of years ago. So they're not really new companies in the sense of how long they've existed, and they've all taken different approaches. Niko with kind of analyzing the land-based market, Nick with a lot of analytics and A/B testing, and then Anton. Talk a little bit about scatter slots, which a lot of people I think at this conference have already said is a unique, innovative approach to the casino genre. Talk a little bit about the team makeup you guys have, because it isn't anyone from the existing land-based world. You guys are out in Ukraine, and talk about kind of your approach to the slot machine, the math, and that title in specifically.
So I won't talk about math, definitely. But so our company started from the slots app, which was pretty innovative in 2011. So we created Slot Journey, which was like a combination of slots and the map progression. So and the idea of scatter slots was pretty the same. We just added like sense of playing slots, not just like seamlessly pushing the spin button. You have each level you have a goal you need to achieve, and goals can be easy, it can be very hard, can be very, very hard, like you need to spend a lot of money to pass it. But the idea is as simple as it is. There is some secrets. So during Geeksy, we met some guys from Zynga. They said we have like dedicated team who play in scatter slots and trying to find secrets. I said, all right, keep going. We don't have secrets, but anyway, people will be busy for some time. So so idea is pretty simple. It's not like secrets in it. We just decided to be innovative on the market, to create something new for these players. And definitely we aimed on male audience at that point. We ended up that the audience right now is pretty common for social casino market, so it's 50-50, let's say, females, males, with a little shift to more young males, maybe. So, as you said, we don't have like land-based or real money experience in our team. So all experience we have, it's our own experience that we've been trying to get for this 6 years already. So that's it.
Great. Niko, your approach, you guys analyze, look at the three-rail market. Clearly that was an underserved market. Talk a little bit about, where you see that growing, and I know you just did a presentation this morning, but kind of how you view that opportunity. And then, as we stand today, are you able to identify any other trends, or are you guys looking at things in the marketplace and trying to apply those same analogies to social?
Sure. So yeah, we identified, we looked at land-based casinos essentially as a kind of analogy for what should exist on mobile social. What are players playing when they're playing slot games, casino games? And that's where the kind of the insight into like, oh, there's an underserved audience here. There's about a third of the market that's not playing kind of these mechanical three-roll machines on mobile. And so where do we see it going? How do we see it growing? It's still obviously very nascent. A lot of the growth has to come from user acquisition. You have to find this audience. Some of them find you, and certainly we found some of the early adopters who were really hungry for this content and got them early on, and we were very pleased to do that. But over time now, it's going to be a question of how do you grow sustainably and find this audience. When you're really competing for that audience is also playing, scatter slots. They're also playing, Super Lucky's titles. They're also playing IGT's titles. So that's going to be the big challenge there. But I do see that market growing to about $500 million if you start looking at market sizing in terms of it's mostly a North American type of gameplay. The North American social casino market is about $2 billion. And so if you apply the same percentage penetration, so about 25 to 30% of the market playing these classic style slot machines, you get to about $500 million opportunity. So that's how we've sized it. So still plenty of growth to go. It's still very nascent. We're probably at no more than $100 million overall market run rate right now. And so it'll be a while before we get to that full penetration. And obviously we'd like to be at the forefront of that. And a big part of our approach is to try and offer this audience slightly different flavors of classic slots to kind of capture those users that are looking for this type of gameplay, but something that's not already out there, including our own titles. So that's where we're kind of going.
And anything you're looking at today that you think you can apply to social, or going to keep those close to the chest?
We have a couple of things that we're looking at that we've kind of also taken inspiration from the land-based world. I don't necessarily want to share that right now. We haven't launched yet. But yeah, certainly if you look at the land-based casinos and you look at what types of gameplay is out there and look at some of the market penetration in the real-life casinos, you would expect to see those trends play out on mobile and social as well. Or at least we believe so.
And then, Nick, you guys seem to be able to release content at an amazing rate with high production values. Kind of talk about your strategy to release a lot of different apps in the market, what that allows you to do, what you've learned from these different types of games, and kind of how you're looking at things over the next 12 to 24 months.
So similar to Niko, in using land-based as an analogy for the land-based slots player versus the social slots player. When you go into a casino and you want to play slots games, you don't go to the Murka room or the Rocket Games room or the Super Lucky Casino room where there's a finite number of machines. Like it's machines on the floor. People kind of look around, they look up, they scan, they find a machine that they're loyal to, a machine that they think looks good, maybe a brand that they're interested in, and then they go to that machine. From there, the consumer stays on that machine if they feel that they're lucky or they're gonna be lucky. This is pretty much the core of the slots player. Speaking to Niko, we do joke and say that slots players are promiscuous. They will have, I think on average, 5.5 slots apps on their phone, and they will bounce between them. So our strategy in response to that environment is that we want to have as many machines on that proverbial floor as possible. And that comes in the form of as many ads out there as possible. So we have, at any given time, 7 or 8 apps that we're focusing on, each with about 40 unique machines in it. So do the math, that's 250 to 300 machines at any given point that we can be advertising. We're very programmatic in our advertising, so if a certain theme isn't working well, users aren't responding to it in the form of click-through conversion rates, or if the quality of those consumers is low. In other words, we're not seeing a big return on our ad spend or a fast return on our ad spend. We just downsort it and focus on the themes that do work until they stop working, and then we find new themes that do. So that's been our response, that's been our innovation. It's working, it's certainly helped us grow. In terms of that continuing for the next 12 to 24 months, I don't see why it should stop. We've gotten our growth from the larger players in the space no longer innovating and no longer being able to properly service their customers. The audience and the customer base in social casino actually has not grown by very much. So the three of us sitting up here have all gotten our audience either by creating new audience in the form of Murka, I think, and to a certain extent, or by taking it away from the larger players for both Rocket and Super Lucky. So I don't see any reason why, if we continue to innovate, that it would ever stop.
If I may just echo that 100%, I think one of the things that I was talking about this morning at the 10 a.m. panel was the big guys all play defense, right? And we've all played offense. That is the big difference between when you get big, fat, and happy, and you're sitting there with a I'm not going to pick on any one of these companies, but you've got your big games. You have to protect your market share. That's all you're really doing is protecting your market share and looking at your quarterly results. Almost all of the big guys are publicly traded and therefore have quarterly earnings to hit. They're very quarterly earnings focused, and every bit of work that they do with their games is going to go into making sure that their quarterly numbers are as strong as possible. We're not encumbered by that, and I think that's one of the reasons that we've been able to take some chances, launch a bunch of different things, see what sticks, go after underserved audiences, and even now, even with the big guys noticing us, I don't think they're well equipped, both culturally but also just organizationally, to go and do the kinds of things that we're going to try, which is new things, new innovations, new audiences.
I fully agree with that, but I will say that Caesars, who is the biggest in the space, is the most innovative of pretty much anybody in the space. So it is possible. I don't know what it is about their culture, their technology. Maybe it's the fact that there are multiple studios, multiple apps, but they really have managed to innovate.
Yeah, I think you said an interesting thing earlier, Nick, that I want to touch upon is that, the sector as a whole, you're arguing you're no longer seeing real user growth, and that, a lot of your success, some of it sure is organic, but, it's kind of a shift in terms of market share and revenues from some of the bigger guys to you guys. I guess to each of the panelists, do you kind of agree with that assessment? Are we now in a marketplace where we're no longer seeing real DAU growth, top line growth is going to be driven by conversions and monetization, or is there still this, kind of real kind of organic growth opportunity over the next 3 to 4 years? So how do you what inning are we in for the social casino market? And let's go, Anton.
So I think the EU starts, it's still growing. Maybe the pace of growth is slower a bit. It's hard to say what is the key success right now on the major marketplace right now. So I think it's in any case it's ability to retain and keep your customers with your game. So whether it will be organically or commercially doesn't matter. So, but I think the opportunity is closing each hour as we're sitting here, and the margin is closing also because the market itself become different in terms of buying ads. But maybe something will change next week. We'll see. Well, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the heady days of growth are over. I think it's we're well past the days where you can just put something out there and it will just grow because people have been clamoring for content, and you're the only one or one of the only ones that's putting it out there. It's no longer enough to be good enough. You have to be better than others, especially if you're a new entrant into the market. We're all going after the exact same player base. I don't think you're going to have a massive amount of new player growth. So the growth is going to have to come from being better at marketing, smarter, more data-driven, better at measuring your return on ad spend, finding pockets of users more profitably than the next guy can, because they're going after the exact same audience. And then secondly, certainly no low-hanging fruit, but there are still opportunities to go after slightly underserved audiences. Male audience in the case of Murka, the classic player in our case, and video slots player.
Pretty well served.
Pretty well served now. So even more impressive what I think Super Lucky's been able to do there. But yeah, I think it's with each day that passes, it's going to be harder and harder for another Murka or a Rocket or a Super Lucky to emerge. I'm not saying it's impossible. It's just harder and harder and harder today than even was 2 years ago.
Do you see anyone coming up the charts these days?
Yeah, Casino Frenzy by Nexon, I think, although that wasn't Huge Games is doing some interesting things with their latest offering, but they've also been around for a while now. It's not like they're brand new to the market. They've been around for a few years now, so not really.
I agree.
All right. How about kind of switching on to UA, big topic in all of mobile gaming, especially so in social casino. The paid install, the CPI is some of the highest out of any genre. and now some of that is certainly because you also get some of the highest LTV users. But talk about your guys' approach to UA being a smaller company in most cases, bootstrapped, not wanting to take on additional capital. Any ad partners, any kind of things that you've been able to try and test that's really worked. And Nick, why don't we start with you this time at the end?
I think the biggest challenge with being a smaller company in UA is cash flow issues. It almost bothers me to a certain extent when people say I would never get into a genre where the CPIs rise above $2. We're very happy to pay $30 or $40 for an install when we have a good indication that that's going to be profitable in X months. X is determined by how much cash we have in the bank account and how long we can hold our breath. We're competing against IGTs, Churchills, Caesars of the world that have tens or hundreds of millions of dollars in their bank account. They can hold their breath. They can wait to get their return on ad spend in 12, 18, sometimes more, 24 plus months. So that's been the biggest limiting factor. But I think all three of us, our properties do return pretty quickly and pretty well. So we're building our residuals as quickly as we're building our cash reserves. So every month we're able to go out and spend more and be able to compete with the big guys. That was only one part of your question. What was the other part?
Well, why don't we let Niko?
Sure. So echo those. So no need to cover that again. I think part and parcel of being a successful games company, any kind of games company, whether you're a social casino or not, is to have as sophisticated as possible marketing function. Up until we launched Viva, we hadn't really done any paid marketing. Everything had been organic growth and cross promo. Once we launched Viva, I would say about half of our company is now dedicated to marketing. So we've had to build up this very different type of muscle memory, very different type of skill set. And you need it. You have to have it. You cannot compete in this marketplace by hoping that your customers are going to find you. So you have to get innovative. You have to get very data-driven. Marketing more and more is becoming a very data-driven function. And I think you need to take the machine zone approach, quite frankly. I mean, I hold them up as kind of the pinnacle of UA and remarketing and email in the industry, and you got to be working across all the different ad networks. Even if you're spending only $1,000 a day on some of them, if you're finding profitable pockets of users, that's just a little edge that you have versus others. And I think longer-term trends are going to be companies having to build out their own infrastructure to a degree that they haven't had to up until now. They've been able to rely on third-party tools or partner services. I don't think you can have an edge long-term in the industry, in any part of the games industry, mobile games industry, but especially in social casino where it's so competitive, unless you build up that function inside your own office.
UA is a big part, I think, for any game and for any business, and for social casino especially. So any tips for newcomers? It's hard because many of the companies, when you starting to spending money, many of the companies want to screw you up. So my idea is to start with a big one, like who won't, like Facebook and video networks like AdColony, Mango, Unity Ads, and then since you'll be able to acquire some healthy traffic from these big guys, to switch to maybe smaller one. But anyway, I would recommend to, as the guy said, to build your own infrastructure and to try to do it by yourself, not to buy in third-party solutions. I mean, buying solutions. Yeah.
I think the thing with the in-house solutions, it kind of goes in two ways. One, nothing out of the box is really ideal. It doesn't work for every company, ideally. So you have to be able to customize, but also just in terms of building enterprise value, which I think all three of us are, you need that expertise in-house. You can't rely on agencies and really feel that you have a fully fledged whole company.
Are you guys seeing anything in terms of, are video ads being particularly successful versus, in the past, the promoted ads on Facebook in terms of attracting customers? And then, Niko, to you, how about the approach in terms of generating ad revenues on your own? Talk about that decision and how you guys think about that, because I know it's was and still a decent part of your business.
Yeah, I guess I can leave the video versus static versus others to these two guys. But yeah, I can talk a little bit about, so a fairly significant portion of our business, it used to be up to 70%, now it's only about 30%, which is a good thing, is actually coming from ads. We generate money from ads, and we show basically these guys as ads, and everybody else is in our game. It was not a decision we took lightly early on, but it was something we needed to do because we were bootstrapped and we needed to generate revenues and cash flow as quickly as possible. And so we A/B tested the, pardon my French, the crap out of whether we were showing ads to players, not to payers. We never show ads to payers, but showing ads to players would hurt monetization on the IAP side or retention because you're sending off players to other games. But to Nick's point, we do joke that slots players are promiscuous. And so they will go and play another game, and they will see an ad for another game, and we'd rather get paid for that than somebody else. And that was the philosophical kind of position that we took. And so that allowed us to essentially build up our business up until the point of launching Viva last summer on the back of essentially ad revenue, which is somewhat unique, I think, in the industry, although more and more companies are now, I think even the big guys are getting comfortable with showing ads to their players.
Only 1 or 2% of revenue goes from ads in our games, so we are, I think, not very good at this, and it's the big opportunity for us to monetize this type of.
No, Angelina says no.
Yeah, yeah, this type of players more. But anyway, yeah, I can say a lot of video ads in the game.
I guess switching from UA to something related, the use of licenses and known third-party IP and brands. How do you guys approach that? One way to offset escalating CPI is via licensing brands, but those can also be quite expensive. Why don't we start with Nick? Have you guys experimented at all with licenses? What's your thought on that? And specifically, the big kind of elephant in the room, Zynga seems to be very aggressive on that front. Any comments about that? Certainly be interesting.
I think Zynga's aggressive because their leadership has always been aggressive with brands, their slots leadership specifically. We have experimented a little bit. I actually come from the music industry prior to this, so leveraged those contacts to get Lil Wayne slots and Jason Aldean slots. And I think they're pretty interesting to compare. Jason Aldean is a big country star. The overlap of country fans and slots fans is bigger than the overlap of hip hop fans and slots fans. I don't think it takes a whole lot of thinking to figure that out. But we wanted to test it. We wanted to see maybe we can convert some hip hop fans to being slots players. It was a total dud. It was a failure. It was a worthwhile experiment, but the game itself is not successful. Last time the four of us did a panel, I was criticized for not putting Lil Wayne music into the app. I don't think that would have made a single difference in the world. So I don't think it was the lack of music. I think it was just not a good fit. So I think as we move forward and we are pursuing more licenses, more brands, we're going to do a lot more research and tests, frankly, to see how well they overlap with our existing audience.
Yeah, we're starting to do some stuff with licensed IP as well. We actually have our first one out as a test. We've got the license to Popeye the Sailor Man, and all related characters, Olive Oil and Sweet Pea and Sea Hag, and the whole universe of Popeye. And we've already tested it, and what we've seen is it doesn't really do much for in-app user behavior, so you don't monetize really that much better on an IP-based game. You don't retain better on an IP-based machine. But where it does work as a UA tool, as a user acquisition tool. People are more likely to click on an ad if they see something they recognize, especially if it has affinity to something from their childhood. It needs to obviously match, to the point of Lil Wayne versus country. So you can't just take any old IP and hope that that's going to work or expect that it's going to work. So you need to have a good kind of overlap between the affinity for the character or the IP and an affinity for slots, and even within slots, an affinity for whatever type of slots you're offering, whether it be classic or video slots or a more mail-oriented experience. So it's still in its early phase. It's working on the marketing side. We're definitely seeing a significant increase in CTRs and install rates once they hit the App Store page. And so expect to see more of that as we go forward. And I think a lot of the big guys, not just Zynga, are now doing more and more with IP, both their, if they're a land-based provider with their own content, obviously, but also kind of licensing in. You saw side games that Betty Boop recently, which actually looks pretty good. Nice game. So yeah, I think you'll see more of that as a differentiator and really more as an acquisition tool.
We just started doing this. We licensed Swan Princess cartoon and King Kong movie. So and we created slots and put it in Infinity slots. But I think, as the guy said already, it's mostly UA tool just to acquire more audience, but not the monetization tool. We're just in the beginning, so I can say a lot of things about this. We'll see. I think it's a good opportunity, as I said, for marketing, for UA, but not monetization, conversion inside the game. So.
I do think that it's important to distinguish between like licensing brands and licensing actual slots IP. Consumers who are used to playing Cleopatra or Wolf Wilds in the casino, they will be a little more loyal within a social casino app, and that actually does have impact on the monetization long run. But I don't think any of us have any of that, so yeah.
Not yet.
Have you guys, any of you looked at, what other genres of games share a similar demographic profile with social slot players? So are you targeting, players from, say, match 3 games? I imagine not a lot of strategy games, but any kind of interesting observations in terms of, what other genres, if the kind of addressable market is static or stagnant here, can you look at? And then somewhat related to that, have any of you guys considered expanding beyond just the casino genre? Obviously, Big Fish operates a number of other games. Playtika has kind of talked about this in the past, but is that kind of in the cards for any of you guys? And I guess Anton?
Yeah, we see an overlap with the match 3 games and hidden object games. So we stopped any side activities in 2014, and we decided to focus only on social casino games. So I think you won't see any like the side genre game from Murka. But yeah, I think it's the part of the strategy of some companies like Zynga. They created Wizard of Oz match 3 game or whatever. So they try to find their whales, find their players in this genre, and get them back to the best monetization they have, like really Wizard of Oz or whatever. So yeah, it's definitely overlap because players don't play slots, and that's it. So they switch from one game to another, and yeah. So.
Yeah, same. I mean, we see overlap between match 3 and hidden object. We've discussed internally whether we should go after those markets, but honestly, that's a completely different set of skills and game balance and arts. Like everything is different. There may be overlap with the audience, but that's it.
Yeah.
You'd have to essentially build a second company to go after that. Having said that, there are certainly, and I know you guys have already done this, with adjacent genres that are more similar, so something like a bingo or even a solitaire, and we've, a la Zynga, discussed internally whether we should take Popeye and maybe make a Popeye solitaire game, use it as a user acquisition tool. You can get a lot more installs for a solitaire game, even if you can't monetize it, and then use that as a cross-promo vehicle into our highest monetizing game. So basically using, it as arbitrage, UA arbitrage. Having said that, you still need to get incredibly lucky and know what you're doing, and you're probably not going to get it right the first time. Just because you can get a lot of installs in solitaire doesn't mean that you will. And so you have to kind of balance that between the known of what we know about slots and the dynamics of launching a new title there versus the unknown of bingo and solitaire and any other genre. So similar to Murka, you're unlikely to see much outside of slots from Rocket, at least for the kind of the next 2, 3, 4 quarters.
We will continue to focus on bingo. The lifetime of a bingo user can be very high if you service them properly. But we, outside of operating from a customer support standpoint, we won't put any more resources into blackjack, video poker, or solitaire. But to Niko's point, if you look at your top publishers from various ad networks, yes, there is some overlap in casual and hidden object, but more than anything, you see your highest quality installs coming from other slots titles and maybe bingo, solitaire, etc. But at least someone in the casino state of mind.
And because I have to somehow tie this in, is anyone going to be doing augmented reality virtual slot game? And you know, I'm sure it's been asked on every panel, but is there anything you can take away from kind of what you've seen from Pokemon Go? Any inspirations, or just rather ignore it and pretend it doesn't exist?
We'll be a late mover on that one.
It's enough for social casino other than the power of IP. You know, I mean, that game was Ingress and had a small following, the exact same game. We're just talking about this with Nick before the panel. The exact same game with you know, Pokemon IP suddenly blows up. That's a learning, all right, but unless you have access to that incredibly powerful IP, there's probably not a whole heap that you can learn in social casino from that.
We consider creating Pokemon slots, so you need to go places to play slots.
Yeah.
I think
All right. I want to open it up to questions first, but any thoughts? You know, we kind of alluded to it earlier. Potentially very large transaction taking place in this sector here. You know, how do you envision that kind of impacting your day to day, or maybe it won't? And just kind of any thoughts around it in general, just because it would be, you know, quite a monumental deal.
I think it hit marketplace in some way, so it heated up. I mean, for us, as I said already, maybe Facebook auction will be different after this acquisition. I don't know, maybe less price for retargeting. Don't know, so we'll see.
So hopefully it helps on UA.
Yeah.
Niko?
This is somewhat subjective, but with, you know, if the deal goes through, I think there is a chance that team is less hungry than they have been up until this point. I mean, to Nick's point, of all the big guys, they've been the most innovative up until this point, and probably the most hungry. You know, hungry on UA, hungry on new features, hungry on content, on new meta mechanics. More so than any other developer, and you know, certainly the large developers. So does that change their mentality a little bit? You know, they can kind of get fat and happy, you know, off the deal. I don't know, but I hope so, because that opens up opportunities for the likes of us too, both on the UA side and on the product side.
I don't have much to add. I hope so as well, but I actually, if I had to bet, I would not see that happening. I would say that Playtika Caesars is kind of the supercell of our little genre. Incredibly impressive. Like, I don't think we could understate how impressive they are and how aggressive they've been. I don't think their aggression will change, or they won't get less hungry, but they might be optimizing around different goals, different levels of profitability. So they might end up spending less, which would certainly benefit all three of us.
Great. Any want to leave some time for questions here in the audience?
Yeah, so you guys talked briefly about IP and its usefulness in doing user acquisition. So I'm curious, how do you actually determine the value of going after licensing one IP versus licensing another?
Well, I'll tell you the honest story of how we got Popeye. I went to the licensing expo in Vegas. I went from stall to stall. I ruled out most because Zynga had already been there and locked them up for social casino. And Popeye was coming up. It was previously in Dragon Play slots. They had the license to that, but after the Cygames Bally mega deal, they didn't want it anymore, and so we got it. It was that simple. There was not an awful lot of evaluating going on. We evaluated the price and made sure that we were comfortable with the price, but other than that, it was and by the way, this actually brings up an interesting point. Went again this year, so this was a year ago. I went again this year. All of the good stuff has been locked up, at least at the expo. I'm sure there's other IP available, but that's going to get harder too. not just Zynga, but others going after the same IP. So going after the same users, and we're going after the same IP. So it's cutthroat out there.
I would just say if your click-through rate doubles, just for round numbers, and your conversion rate doubles, then you basically just brought down your cost of install by 75%. But where that logic breaks is you're assuming that the quality of the user will be just as high, and in a lot of cases they're just window shoppers because they're interested in the brand, not actually interested in slots. So I think it's really important to be careful in that regard. But it's a pretty easy evaluation if you can run a test.
Yep, question?
You guys all talked quite a bit about UA, and that certainly feeds into retention and eventual LTV of your players. When you're looking at these metrics and your efforts around UA and increasing retention and the overall LTV metrics, are you looking at your players from the perspective of a single game, or you all have quite large portfolios, or do you track that and think about it and optimize it as a portfolio metric?
So we have, I'll say, regarding Murka, we have two major games. We look both ways. So we analyze in terms of one particular game, another game, and combined. So we've seen some like overlapping. So we might buy in the same users. We bought for one game. We can buy them for another, but it's a very small percentage. Anyway, yeah. I think you guys have a lot of apps, so maybe you have more insights on this.
So, yeah, we always say we don't care which game the user spends on. So we're very happy to bounce them from one app to another based on behaviors they're displaying. Everyone talks a lot about their DAU, and if you have multiple titles, you could very well be double counting people. So that's something we're trying to figure out right now. Like, we know our aggregate DAU, we actually don't know our true unique DAU. But we can track users from game to game and actually value them on our network.
And yeah, we absolutely look at metrics on a per game basis, and then basically we look at things by source. So where did we get this install? What is the organic LTV? What is the Facebook LTV? What is, et cetera? Different ad networks. We look at things by platform, so it's going to be different for iOS, Android, Amazon, Facebook. We look at things by title, obviously, and then we try to look at things at the network level. To Nick's point, it's not always easy looking at things at the network level, but that's the ultimate, that's the dream, is to have a kind of a network level LTV by channel, by source, by time of year even. So you're going to see more and more companies get more and more kind of granular on monitoring that kind of stuff.
Niko, you were talking about the big guys becoming more defensive to keep their audience, and you guys are more like hungry and acquiring aggressively. My question is, like, you guys are not that young anymore, right? 3, 4, 5 years of company, and did like significant amount of UA. Of course, you have like blue ocean of new users. The question is, where is the turning point between like shifting and allocating more budget for retention and less focusing on aggressive UA? And because those guys, the big guys like you mentioned, are like there many years in terms of retention. What time? When is the turning point for allocating more budgets for retention?
I think that's a great question. I think, when I say that the big guys get defensive and they're basically trying to protect their audience, I mean, they're smart to do so because you don't want to lose a great payer to a competitor. So you do need to make sure you do that. We never really had to worry about that until Viva in particular, and now it goes kind of in general classic. We have about 3 or 4 titles that we care about a lot. So I think the turning point comes when you launch the game. If it doesn't work, you don't care. You don't worry too much about it. If it does work, you go aggressive on UA and you try and build up your audience as big as you can, as quickly as you can, to kind of build up the revenues, build up the user base, and continue aggressively investing in features to make sure people keep coming back. And then there comes a point where you're doing less on UA because it gets really, really expensive. The older your game is in market, the more expensive it becomes. And at that point, you do really focus on optimizing for retention. Ideally, you do all of these things at the same time, but in reality, when you're a smaller company, you can't always focus on that many things. So I'd say the point comes, I don't know if there's a number, but a few months into the life cycle of a successful game, that's when you really start to focus on re-engagement. And there's a lot of low-hanging fruit you can do first, but that's when you start to focus, at least for us.
I've never thought about this before, but I'd say maybe when your growth slows to 5% month over month, something like that, then it's probably time to switch to maybe even, well, I don't know, but switch more towards retargeting and re-engagement.
The bigger you become, the more shift for retargeting you will have. So, if you smart enough. So, but the bigger payer base you have, the more you need to retain commercially to your game. So, yeah, from the first day, you need to focus on retargeting.
Thank you.
Any other? There's one back there.
Just a really direct question. Is it possible in today's market to do a 50% return on advertising spend within 30 days in the current market, in your opinion? Or are you looking, and if not, then what is the actual time frame, would you say, to?
I would just say that any return on ad spend is achievable. It just depends on how much volume you want. It's kind of counterintuitive, right? Like there's no such thing as a bulk discount. As you want more volume, you have to spend more on a per unit basis. So inherently, your return on ad spend is going to go down. But yeah, it's totally possible to have 50% in 30 days if your bids are lower and therefore your volume is lower.
I would also add to that, it depends on the life cycle of your game as well. I mean, that is 100% true, and that's always going to be true regardless of what the life cycle is. But it is a lot easier to get a higher return on ad spend the younger your game is in market, because you haven't yet reached the total addressable market. The older you are in market, I mean, I don't know how they keep doing it, but I mean, Slotomania has something like 350 million lifetime installs, and I'm sure some of those are double counted with new generation devices and what have you, but it's incredible that they're still able to acquire users at such volumes and continue to grow that business at that level. So that's when it's really hard. When it's brand new, that's when it's the easiest. And then everything in between is a sliding scale.
Any others? I think
All
we're
right.
all set.
Well, thanks again to the panel.